Hey guys, trying to keep this one relatively short today, I hope. Just because it's kind of dark and obviously you can't really see me that well. But just wanted to talk a little bit today. So, me and my brother have been a little bit nostalgic of late. We grew up playing RTS games like Age of Empires 2, StarCraft, and Warcraft 3. Now, again, like I've been saying in all these videos, I haven't really been paying that much attention to politics. And it's getting closer and closer to election season, so eventually I'm going to have to switch over and start paying attention once again. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the company that created a lot of those great RTS games, and that's Blizzard Entertainment. Now, Blizzard had a really good reputation for a long time, making the greatest RTS games of all time, in my personal opinion. While the pathing in StarCraft, the original one, was pretty bad, and even when they remastered the game, the AI and the pathing of the characters was really wonky. It created a really interesting universe. And the formula was almost completely perfected with Warcraft 3. In fact, I was watching a video, and I think I specifically called it How Warcraft 3 Destroyed Its Own genre. I always say genre, I know that's wrong. My brain always wants to say it like that for some reason. But the basic premise of it is that when Warcraft 3 came out, they released tools, a map maker, a map editor, where you can make your own custom maps. And it was completely free. You didn't have to pay anything for it. People could make anything they wanted, almost to the same ability of the designers themselves. And Blizzard did not copyright any of the maps that were made. They belonged to whoever made them. And the video gets into how one of the game modes that come out of the editor was Dota, and how Dota replaced RTS games, and how it took Blizzard about 5 years too late to come up with their own Dota clone. Because the creator of Dota, was not centered there at all. The creator of Dota actually came to Blizzard and pitched it as a full game, and Blizzard kind of laughed him out of the room because Blizzard eventually created World of Warcraft. And me and my brother back in the day played a lot of World of Warcraft. Now, my brother more than me, and he was more social, so he had like friends who played it. Whereas I only ever met people inside the game, and me and my brother very rarely, if ever, played at the same time. And originally I created a character on his account, and it was an elf hunter, and I didn't really know how to play the game, so by the time I hit like level 40 or so, my character was pretty unbalanced. I didn't have a good gear for the character. I didn't understand how to min-max, and my character was practically broke. And I was always spending money on stuff I didn't need. So eventually I got my own account, and that's actually where I got my name, The Commander. My brother came up with it. And I made another Night Elf Hunter, which I got to around level 55 or so, and I think I dipped my toes into Catechism. when that expansion came out. And I quit not long before I left high school, like in my junior or senior year. Because again, there was a big portion of the game I was missing. I was part of a guild, but the guild wasn't that big. It had it had the maximum amount of people that you could have at the time. But we weren't really doing any raids. There wasn't any collaboration or anything like that. I wasn't going on the big missions. And it kind of made me feel a little bit lonely, honestly. I didn't want to leave the guild or anything like that. But I didn't know how to find another one, a good one. And my brother moved us to Duskwood, a realm that had a low population, and still to this day has a low population. And like I said, we've been kind of nostalgic of late. Now my brother brought it up first, but he talked about how he wanted to play WoW Classic, and he wanted to play it on hardcore mode, which means that if your character ever dies while you're playing, that character is gone. It's deleted. I think it's actually deleted instantaneously. You're just done. And you cannot play that character anymore. Which I thought was interesting, but at the same time I'm I don't want to dedicate hours and hours and hours to playing a mode and then eventually get to a high level 50, and then I end up in a really crappy situation, or I fall off a cliff or something dumb like that. Because there is fall damage in the game, and you end up losing all your progress. Anyways, I started to watch a guy, Jay Barrino, kind of a liberal, I think, but at the same time, I really don't care what your politics are, as long as you don't bring it into your Let's Plays. And Jay Barrino, almost never talks politics. And I found a Let's Play of him doing Warcraft 3 Reforged. Now, back to Blizzard. Blizzard has had a lot of problems over the years. And I'm not talking about the workplace issues that they had. Because when people talk about sexism in the workplace, there's really three options. And it's hard to judge, and everyone bandwagons, jumps on, starts accusing the company of all this stuff. They get 20 people who make accusations, and it makes it look really bad. And you have to actually pay attention to what's being said. And I can't tell you for sure exactly what happened, but there's always three options when words like sexism in the workplace gets thrown around. One, there actually is sexism. They're a male manager is hitting on or groping or making inappropriate remarks or asking for favors from female employees, or otherwise making their life miserable. It is a possibility. It does happen. But there's two other options. The other options is that there are female employees, perhaps in conjunction with certain male employees, who want a higher position in the company, and they weren't getting special treatment, so they start throwing around accusations and basically trying to run an internal coup because they are not happy that their politics aren't dominating the social space. And they want more power, more influence, and they just make up a bunch of crap and push for their own agenda inside the company. And they exaggerate and they lie and they scheme and they like come together. It's like a conspiracy, basically, to take control of the company from within. And the third option is that same thing. There are people inside the company who are upset that their politics haven't dominated the entire company yet. And it's a bunch of people who have like transitioned and are upset that their preferred pronouns weren't being used within the company. Now, from what I understand with Blizzard, is they actually legitimately had some issues, but it was less about actual sexism in the workplace and more about greed within the company. See, Blizzard dominated the RTS strategy, like the RTS genre, for years. And Warcraft 3 was the best RTS game, again, of all time. Now again, some people may argue they might have like Command and Conquer on their list, or they might prefer other games. But it had a great story. It had a wonderful campaign. It had a very interesting concept where they had hero characters that you could play even in custom maps, where you could build and create your own heroes. And you can really dominate the game, where your army still mattered, but you had these really awesome characters that you can give any backstory to them that you wanted. A really good role-playing experience. But once they moved to World of Warcraft, suddenly RTS games weren't important anymore. And a lot of people within the company wanted to continue to create RTS games. Now, they could have technically have done that. They could have made a Warcraft 4 in conjunction with World of Warcraft, where like there's a time skip within World of Warcraft that takes place after whatever time period that Warcraft 4 would take place. And a lot of the best game designers in the world, at least when it came to RTS games, really wanted to work on a new Warcraft game or a new StarCraft game. And for like a decade, there was no RTS game being made at Blizzard. So a lot of these people left, and they wanted to keep the RTS genre alive. And the reason why there was no RTS game being made is because Blizzard was making so much money on subscriptions with World of Warcraft, which was a great game, don't get me wrong. Absolutely expansive world where you could spend literal days, weeks worth of time playing unholy amount of quests. And even when you ran out of quests, you could spend a lot of time with a raid group of up to 60 people in some cases, fighting against some of the hardest bosses ever created. And just having a hell of a time doing it. But again, the very genre that made Blizzard famous in the first place was being neglected. And a lot of these people had become absolute experts at making an RTS game. And they wanted to continue to do so. So they left and made their own game. And I believe it was called Stormgate. Well, it wouldn't be surprising to me at all if it turned out that Blizzard, in one way or another, threatened game journalists who have been bought by the gaming industry for literal decades now to not talk about Stormgate. And again, I can't even tell you if that's actually a name. The game could actually be called like Stormfront or Storm Shield or something like that, because I literally only learned about it like a few days ago. Honestly. I didn't even know. If I had known that the game had existed, I would have played it, because I waited a very long time for StarCraft 2. There was a time when me and my brother played so much StarCraft back in the day that my mom actually hid the CD for the game so we would focus on our homework instead of playing StarCraft. That's how addicted to the game me and my brother were. We absolutely loved Brood War. Brood War was beautiful. And I played way the hell more custom campaigns and custom games from StarCraft than I ever did from Warcraft. But both the lore for StarCraft and Warcraft is so expansive, such an interesting universe. Both universes are so interesting. As time went on, writers started to come out, and it seemed like they were almost jealous of the creators of the games that came before them. And they started to write crappier and crappier dialogue, crappier stories, and started to really take a piss all over the lore that came before it. For instance, a lot of people complained that the Night Elf starting area was burned to the ground. If you're not aware, in Warcraft, the Night Elves was a species of immortal beings that fought a group of demons 10,000 years before in the story's lore. And then they gained immortality by making a druidic pact with what's called a world tree. Basically like Yggdrasil from Norse mythology, a giant tree like 100 stories tall, basically. And at the end of the original Warcraft, the Night Elves gave back their power to the World Tree. So in World of Warcraft, they created a new World Tree and tried to remake a new pact that would give them back their immortality. And they made a giant World Tree on an island, and it had a really cool backstory to it. And some executive somewhere basically forced the starting area, because that's where level 1 characters for the Night Elf started, to destroy the area so it couldn't be played anymore, to like raise the stakes. And the designers of the game actually like vehemently protested against it. They didn't like it, it was stupid, but it had to be done. And over time, a lot of players just eventually quit on the game, left. They got sick of like spending $15 every month on subscriptions, and the amount of subscribers in the game has risen and fallen, but the game still sits at about 9 million subscribers, which is around about the peak of the game. But you have to remember that this game came out like 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. And there's like a billion more people now than there was 20 years ago. So, the fact that they have like stagnated in subscriptions goes to show just how they lost a lot of people. And people just moved on, they wanted to play other games, no one else ever came out with a true replacement for World of Warcraft. And World of Warcraft is so expansive nowadays that you really can't get anything as in-depth as it now, even though they highly simplified a lot of the mechanics. So as I wanted to try it again. So I jumped in. You can play for free now when you download it, up to level 20. And I played the new area where you play in the homeland of the dragons. And in one day, I got all the way up to level 20. And I opened up a ticket because anyone who played back in the day, so many expansions have come out that if you stopped playing like 15 years ago, a lot of your characters no longer appear on your character list. And another thing that Blizzard stopped doing about 4 or 5 years ago, apparently, is they turned off their phone number so you can't call and get live support anymore. And even if you want to talk to somebody live, it has to be for a very specific set of issues. You have to open up a ticket and request that they fix something for you. So I opened up the ticket and asked them, hey, can I get back my characters from 15 years ago? And apparently it is possible. But I have to pick the right topic, go through the whole rigmarole, get somebody to understand what I'm asking, and you have to get somebody to fix the whole thing for you. And it's just a real pain. And anti-consumer tactics like that, bad writing, scaring off their biggest developers like Grumps. If you're not aware, Grumps was one of the big guys at Blizzard. And nowadays, he has gone, well, I wouldn't say he's a full right-wing, Republican dude, but he's definitely against a lot of the anti-consumer, political crap that a lot of game companies push nowadays. And Grumps has become really popular on Twitter with a lot of guys like me, and he talks about the many issues that the gaming industry has done. I already talked all about Gamergate and how the whole movement was started because a female game designer was sleeping with game journalists for better reviews for a crappy game that she made, so that more people would be tricked into buying her game. She would get higher reviews, more people would buy the game, they would be disappointed with it, and she would rake in a bunch of money in what was basically a scam. And it became pretty obvious that game designers, including indie game designers, big corporations, gaming journalists, news outlets, in some cases, non-game journalists, just regular journalists, and even some politicians were all collaborating. It wasn't a conspiracy, it was all about making money, so anybody who wanted to make money made deals with each other. If you gave a game a bad review as a game journalist, you would not be allowed to review that company's next game. Because what these game designers would do is that they would release an early version of the game to these game journalists. And these game journalists would be the first ones to release a review. They would get a bunch of people coming in to their website, and these websites were full of advertisements. And the more people that appeared on these websites, that went to these websites, the more advertising revenue these companies would earn, and the more that these advertising companies would want to advertise on these websites. So the advertisers, the game journalists, and the game companies all had basically this silent deal with each other that you give us good reviews, we will let you have early access to these games, and then you'll get a bunch of views on your website, and then you'll get a bunch of advertising revenue, and then these advertising companies will flock to you. And it was just a big circle jerk. Which is why you don't see a lot of games getting like a 50% score. Because in reality, a 50% score, or a C, like a C score, or a C plus score, that's an average score. That is what you would expect from a perfectly average game that people would want to play, that would have a satisfactory like time playing it. They won't regret buying it. It won't be their favorite. It won't be their least favorite. It won't be a broken mess. Just totally average gaming experience that somebody will walk away from satisfied. How many times have you ever seen anybody get a 5 out of 10, or a 2.5 out of 10, or a 50%, or a C score? It like never happens. You'll see 70% or 80% for a totally just lackluster game. And that was because these companies were outright lying. Anything under like a 75 or a 7 out of 10 is considered a bad game. And you would not get early versions in early release of the game if you gave anything less than a 7 out of 10. And it became really obvious that all these people were corrupt. Like the game companies, the game journalists, they were corrupt. It was a big money-making scheme to fool the customer, to trick the customer into buying a $60 game that really should have only been worth like $30. And when people started to complain about it, these gaming journalists didn't want to lose their honeypot. And these gaming companies didn't want to be exposed into essentially bribing these companies. And the advertisers didn't want the heat either, because they were funding these people and their names were tied to these companies. So they didn't want any of the heat either. So they found a very loud minority of people who were saying like racist, sexist things, or the edgelords who just wanted to get a rise out of people, and saying, no, it's all about them hating women. They don't want women in the gaming industry. Despite the fact that women in general just don't really care about programming. Like, look back at some of the biggest companies in gaming history. Look at Half-Life and Valve Entertainment. They found the best of the best. The biggest, most dedicated people in the gaming industry. They didn't give a crap where you came from, whether you were an indie developer or a big-time Microsoft guy. They brought in anybody they thought would be good for the job. They didn't care about your race, your sex, your nationality. They brought in everybody possible. And for the original Half-Life, there was like 2 women, like at most, that worked on the original Half-Life. I'm sure there might have been more, but we're talking about a small percentage. And it's just that women don't really get into game design, into programming. It's just not an industry that they really care about. You see women in like HR or marketing or something like that, but very rarely will you find a woman in game design. And it has nothing to do with sexism, it's just how it turned out, either culturally or based on like, I wouldn't say biology, but culturally, it's just not a big career path for women. But they use that as the big excuse for why, like, the gamers were all a bunch of bigots. And that it's the gamers ruining the gaming industry. It has nothing to do with, like, overpriced games and a bunch of circle jerk guys lying about how good their games are and causing a bunch of problems for the gamers. No, it's the customer that's wrong. And sometimes the customer is wrong. The customer is not always right. And the same kind of thing happened with Blizzard Entertainment. Again, if you, like, criticized where the game was going, if you thought the voice acting was bad, if you thought the story was bad, if you thought the decisions being made, then you were just off-written as some kind of bigot, or like your favorite game designer got fired from Blizzard, or they were basically forced out of the company because they no longer were able to make the games they wanted, with them being replaced by inferior versions, basically. Inferior game designers in order to make, like, the gaming industry more inclusive or whatever. And I had nowhere near have, like, ticked upon every single problem with Blizzard. And there were many. There are some cool things about Blizzard, like how a bunch of their guys came together and formed a band called, like the Tauren Marine. And, like, you could still do cool stuff within the company. But if you wanted the company from, like, 20 years ago that made, like, World of Warcraft, or the company from 25 years ago that made Warcraft 3, just doesn't exist anymore. Especially after the parent company of Blizzard formed a merger with Activision. See, back in the day, I remember that when StarCraft 2 came out, I was a bit of a nerd, and I was on the forums for StarCraft 2. And there was a forum called Joey Ray's Bar. And it was basically the do anything you want bar. Or it wasn't about, like, you know, talking about the game. It wasn't about, like, it was just a fun, miscellaneous bar. Like the forum posts, whatever you wanted. And that's where I met a bunch of friends of mine that I still occasionally message. A lot of them went kind of liberal too, but these are still people that I care about, that I still talk to. Like friends that I knew for a long time. And we formed a role-playing group where we would basically, like, make a forum and we would role-play out some story. Somebody would make, like, a basic overview on what we were doing. We would come in every single day and we would make a post on what our character was doing in that world. And it was just like a fun little thing. Joey Ray being like a character from StarCraft. And like at the very beginning of StarCraft 2 on Marsara, there's a bar that Jim Raynor always went to. And it was why Jim Raynor was one of my favorite characters of all time. And for a long time, my profile picture was Jim Raynor. And I remember we did one role play where my character was a ghost, like a psychic guy trained in assassination and espionage, and he was from Earth, and he was part of the UAD, and my father was part of the original group that came to the Kapulu sector, and I was cut off with all the rest of the UAD, and I had joined like some kind of like basically as a mercenary. And it was a whole thing. And eventually Joey Ray's the forum, which catered to a lot of people. It wasn't just us making role plays, but a lot of anything you wanted to talk about, and like anything that was off topic from StarCraft. And even stuff like, again, we role played out like as StarCraft characters, as these custom characters, and had a good time doing it. And eventually they were shutting down Joey Rays. And it was like, why? Like, a lot of people love it here. There's a lot of us that are hanging around. And I had left the community for a while, and eventually I came back. And it was like some of the last forum posts were about how they were shutting it down and we were closing the bar, figuratively. And I think the guy who was like had a lot of seniority, who like ran the bar, he wasn't an employee or anything, but he was like one of the oldest like forum posters in Joey Ray's. And I think his name was, I think it was Zarkin who ran it. Anyways, he was like doing a role play where he was like cleaning glasses, and he was like, well, boys, we're finally shutting down and we're going out of business. And we ended up creating a Discord channel. And occasionally I'll pop in there and talk to somebody. One of my friends went like gender neutral. It was just, I felt bad about that because I used to play games with that guy. And I kind of wish that I had actually stuck around playing PlayStation Network, because me and him would play Call of Duty. But Call of Duty, as much as I loved it, I never could stick with one game for long. And eventually I'll get sick of Call of Duty, or I'll get sick of StarCraft, or I get sick of Warcraft, or WoW. And I'll move on to the next game. And then I'll come back to it, and by the time I came back to it, my friends had also moved on. And I felt bad that, I wasn't there for my buddies. Where I'll just like pop in once in a while and be like, hey guys, like, how you been? I know it's been like 3-4 years since I last talked to you, but how you been? And I feel bad about not keeping in contact. And they went through a lot, like sometimes like a friend would go through a lot of like crap in their life, and they would end up like falling into some kind of thing where like political movement or whatever, and I wasn't there to like help them out or like be a rock for them. I feel kind of bad, but people make their own decisions in life. They could also reached out to me at any time. And it's just, people drift apart, things happen, and it's just crappy like that. But again, a lot of it, this community stuff, the community falling apart, like Joey Ray's falling apart, like the game World of Warcraft, where people like eventually got sick of the bad writing or the crappy updates. Like, it's not being about hanging out with friends. It became more about just Blizzard wanting to make money, not wanting to support the fun stuff that the community used to do, where you can't even get in contact with an employee anymore, that you just have to hope that you wrote in your ticket enough details for them to like barely give enough of a shit to give you like to fix whatever issue you're having. And it's like, do I really want to pay $15 a month and spend hours and hours of my day after work playing this game where I'm like still like a single guy. Is that what I want to do? Just like, because like the whole like living in your basement playing video games thing, it's somewhat true, ain't it? Like being addicted to a video game and paying $15 a month. You want to get like your $15 worth if you're doing that. It's just, there is a reason why a lot of these games went free to play a long time ago. But a lot of those games also failed because then they became pay to win, which is a whole nother mess, where you could pay real world money to have somebody to get like free gold, free resources, so you didn't have to go through the grind. And it's just, you know, as long as you had enough real world currency, you could make a elite character without having to lift a finger. And it's just kind of frustrating. But, you know, just anti-consumer stuff from the entire industry. And Blizzard has been a big part of that, especially Activision Blizzard. And then them disparaging their old employees. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if the game journalists and Blizzard conspired with each other to make sure that Stormgate, or whatever it was called, never made it into the media. And it caused it to fail. Like, that RTS game was supposed to help revive the genre. It was the game that the best RTS game designers, again, in my opinion, in the world created in order to keep the genre going. After games like Dota and League of Legends replaced RTS games. And a lot of people have a lot of problems with like League of Legends and Dota. Now, RTS games are, well, if you're not playing a custom campaign, if you're playing multiplayer, there's a high skill ceiling to those games. I only ever made it very temporarily into platinum, or I might never have even made it into platinum. I think I made it like very like temporarily into gold. Now, to be fair, as much as I love StarCraft, and I loved playing the game, and I absolutely loved like trying to get good at the game, there was a certain point where I was just like, I got sick of the grind and trying to hit that skill ceiling. Then once I hit gold, and then I lost it like a day later, I was like, you know what, I don't want to put in the literal hundreds of hours required to get good at this game. Like, that, I don't need this. It would not be fun anymore. I have ADHD, it's too much to do, whatever. And I moved on to something else. But still, it's a really nostalgic game series, both StarCraft and Warcraft. These are games that I absolutely love. Like, I love them. And it just makes me upset that, you know, that Blizzard is not that company anymore. It just isn't. And that's just sad. But anyways, I'll leave it there. It's just, if my personal thing is if they don't give me back my childhood characters, my like profile from back in the day, then I'm not gonna pay them. And even if they do, I don't want to pay for like a year's worth of subscription to play World of Warcraft. I got other things to do with my time. I got actual career goals like schoolwork and promotions for my military stuff that I need to work on. Not playing World of Warcraft. And it's not because like there's just a negative connotation to spending time doing World of Warcraft. It's just there's so much I still need to do. Like I still want to have a wife and kids, and I need to get outside once in a while, not stay in my room all day playing WoW. There's not a lot of like females that play those kinds of games. You don't really meet people like that. And if you meet somebody in like World of Warcraft, well, those people just want to play World of Warcraft with you. They often don't want to go out and play other games. Like, these are not the people you meet in World of Warcraft. I'm sure there are people out there who have had a different experience, but they want to just play World of Warcraft, and it's rare for them to have a similar similar hobbies or similar interests as you do for other types of games, especially if they're the type of person who's been playing World of Warcraft for like the last 22 years. Dear Lord, there are still people who are playing with the same group of guys for 22 years. There's like this one guy who make World of Warcraft webcomics, and I have to wonder if he's still making those comics. Or was it a female? It might have actually been a female, like, comic book creator, webcomic creator. Again, not saying that women don't play these types of games, it's just rarer. And again, it's not really the type of place. Not everyone's like Lord Minion 777, which is one of one of Markiplier's best friends who met his wife playing Minecraft. That is so rare, where you meet somebody in a text chat in a video game and end up meeting them not only meeting them in person, but getting married to them. Dear Lord. And I have to wonder, if I do get back my old character, if there will be any friends from back in the day that were on my friends list who are still playing. And all those people are people that I met playing World of Warcraft. It'd be kind of funny if like those characters are still there. I doubt it. Oh man, I could go on and on about memories of World of Warcraft. But it's just nerdy, but yeah, it is what it is. But I'll leave it there, guys. Just me being nostalgic. Bye.